What's good, my dear language learning master? And welcome to episode number 28 of the Language Input podcast, in which, as you know, I'm going to talk about different topics related to language learning in order to help you understand that the way we've been learning languages throughout our entire lives is just horrible. But also that, we can all learn any language when join the process, every step of the way. Yeah, I'm totally convinced by that. So that's my main goal with this. Okay. And well, as usual, before getting started with today's topic, let me remind you that if you're listening to this on YouTube or any platform where you can leave your comments, feel free to do so. Let me know what you think about today's specific topic, about any question, any topic related to language learning. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. All right. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into today's episode. And in today's episode, number 28, like I said, I'm going to talk about language levels and certificates, those B1, C1, Spanish B2, English C1, French B1, or whatever you want to call it, right? And I'm going to talk about why I'm not a fan of those, okay? Well, the first obvious reason, you may have guessed it already, right, is because they're based, those certificates and those language levels are based on what I call the traditional grammar approach, right? In which we have to, consciously learn grammar rules. Like I said, memorize vocabulary lists and so on. All those things we're unfortunately so accustomed to doing, right? When learning a new language. And because of that, I believe they have nothing to do with actual fluency or your actual knowledge of the language or your actual ability to communicate in the language, right? Like, I'm sure you know a lot of people who have certain certificates in a foreign language and they can't really communicate in the language, and the other way around. Thousands and millions of people with no certificate whatsoever and that can perfectly communicate in the target language, right? But also the reason why I'm not a big fan of them is, even if it's not for the sake of a certificate, just to sort of get a sense of where you're at or what your level is, I'm still not a big fan of, those B1s, B2s, stuff like that, because as I've talked about many times previously on this podcast and on my project, I don't think you can really measure it that specifically, and especially what I mean is, as I've talked about, I'm sure you can relate to this, your ability to understand in a foreign language is always way ahead of your ability to speak, your ability to communicate, right? I'm sure you can relate to it. Yeah, like you may be able to understand, say, 90%, just an example, 90% of what you're listening to or reading, but when it comes to communicating, you're still not there, right? Like you can say things here and there, you can somehow communicate, but you're not where you'd like to be at, right? And certainly you cannot communicate the same way you can understand what you're listening to, right? So how do you measure that, right? Like, it's, like, to give you some examples, in my own personal journey, if let's say we would take Portuguese, all right, Brazilian Portuguese, when it comes to understanding the language, I may, according to that scale, I might be on a C2 level. But when it comes to communicating, I'm not there at all. I can communicate, I can perfectly communicate, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. So in that sense, I could be a B2, I don't know, or somewhere along those lines. Then once again, when it comes to reading, it might be close to C2 once again, because Portuguese and my native language Spanish are related. So my point is, if you take any language that you speak or someone speaks and you break it down, when it comes to understanding, speaking, reading, writing, you're always going to be in different levels, because it's just the way the language process works. As I'm always talking about, if you look at kids, they listen to the language for a long time until they're ready to start speaking. And when they're 10 months old, 1 year old, 14 months old, they don't speak a single word yet, but they understand quite a lot, right? Because you tell them something and they perform a certain move, or they do something to let you know that they understood what you said, right? So again, it's just how the process works. So our ability to understand is always going to be ahead, right, of our ability to speak, I mean. So, I'm not a fan of, levels overall, but I'm way more comfortable with, like beginner, intermediate, advanced. It's still not ideal for me because, like in my case, I start saying that I speak a certain language when I'm able to communicate in that language naturally. Like I'm always saying, still with a lot of room for improvement, right? But I consider that I speak a new language when I understand what's being said to me, or most of it, and I can communicate in the language, all right? Somewhat naturally, okay? And with a lot of room for improvement, like I said. So with that being said, that to me is the most important, like, distinction, if you will, okay? Like being able to communicate in the language or not. And, according to that scale, well, I'm always going to talk about resources for beginners or intermediates or advanced based on what I believe, or based on, my journey and what I believe are appropriate resources for each specific level. But as I'm always talking about, it all comes down to you telling yourself the truth, right, on whether you understand a specific resource or not. So that's why, it's just hard for me to tell if, what a person's specific level in a certain language is, Not that it's that important, in my eyes, but you get the point, right? You understand what I mean. And what I mean, I'm gonna connect it with yet another part of the equation that I want to talk about when it comes to language levels and certificates, right? Because I've said it many times, but I understand language learning, the reason why I learn languages is to be able to communicate with native speakers, which is just a tremendous pleasure. So I'm not worried at all when it comes to, learning a new language in order to be able to find more clients, or in order to, to find a specific job opportunity, or, like practical, like quote unquote practical stuff, right? And when I talk about these things about level, I still get some people tell me, but I want to learn English or Spanish or whatever the language, in order for my career to be more successful, or to find X job opportunity, or whatever the practical reason, quote unquote, again. Yeah. And they tell me, so that's kind of useful, because some companies or public, if you're applying for a public job, whatever it is, that even, like, for example, right now in Spain, I believe, if you're going to teach in a bilingual school, you need to have at least like a B2 in English, a B2 certificate in English to be able to do so, right? But getting back to the beginning of the podcast, I'm sure that a lot of teachers who do have that certificate but can't really use English, so it's pretty much useless. And the reason I don't like it, even in that sense, that it seems to make more sense because in a certain company or school or whatever it is, they need to know that you have a certain level in that language, right? Or at least good enough for what your task is going to be, yeah. But I just don't get it, because with languages it's just so easy. I mean, like, when it comes to languages, you can't fake fluency, like let's take a company who wants to hire an employee, like in Spain, a native Spanish speaker with that can communicate in English, because they're gonna do business with companies in the UK, whatever the example. So what do you need certificates for? Like, just in the job interview or whatever you're doing to hire a new employee, just talk to them in English, in this case, right, in the target language. Like, there's no way to fake fluency. This is not like a grammar exam in high school, or even studying for that specific certificate in which you learn the grammar rules, or just any other topic or any other exam in high school in which you just memorize a lot of things, sort of wrote about them in the exam and then forgot everything about that one day later, right? In a way, you can fake that. You can fake that knowledge, if you know what I mean. Okay, but when it comes to languages, when it comes to fluency in a language, when it comes to being able to communicate in that language, there's no way to fake that. In that specific moment, either you can or you can't, right? Or maybe you can, but with that sort of hesitant style with a lot of pauses, which might not be what the company needs, or whatever the example, right? So I just puzzling for me because they just don't make sense at all. And I get the part of getting someone using those certificates to get someone who meets a specific criteria, but you don't need that. Just speak to that person. There's no way to fake fluency. But anyway, because even if in those certificates there's a speaking part, right? But you can learn all the grammar rules and everything, and do really well on all the other parts, and somehow make up for it. I mean, make up for the speaking part with that other part. You just do okay in the speaking part if you can communicate a little bit, and you can make up for it on the other parts that you can actually study about. But when it comes to actually communicating, when it comes to actually speaking, there's no way to fake that. There's no trick to memorize words and just use them in a conversation, because real fluency, like natural fluency as well, it cannot be faked. And I'm sure you agree with that. So anyway, I'd say this is not as like, this episode is not related to the how can I say that? It's not related to the usual topics that I'm talking about, when it comes to ideas and tips and and other things, in order to help you understand how the process works, and to help you, like I said at the beginning, understand that you can learn any language when you're in the process. But in a way, I believe, that obsession with certificates and with specific levels and so on, I find it can be a little bit crippling as well for people. They really get obsessed with that, when it has nothing to do with real fluency. It has nothing to do with actually being able to communicate in the language, right? But again, of course, I'm well aware of the fact that, again, it all gets back to the traditional grammar approach, and yeah. Anyway, I'll never understand how the traditional grammar approach works, or how someone thought at some point in history that we could learn a language that way. It's just crazy to me. But anyway, just a little piece of complaining about the traditional grammar approach in every episode. It's okay. Nah, just kidding. All right, so that's today's episode, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's gonna help you relax a little bit if you're one of those people, a little bit obsessed when it comes to getting a certificate or obsessed with those specific levels. All right, because just continue to get comprehensible input. If you do that, the process working, as I'm always saying, and at some point you're gonna be able to communicate, and that's all it matters. And if you can communicate, you don't need any certificate or related thing, and you don't need to worry about A1, B2, C3, C3PO, or whatever it is, because you're gonna be able to communicate in the language, which is everyone's, or should be everyone's, ultimate goal, right? But anyway, so yeah, like I said, hope you enjoyed it, and once again, leave your comments down below with your opinion on today's specific topic or any other question, idea, suggestion you may have when it comes to the language learning process. And I'll see you in the next one, my dear language learning masters. So have a good day, whatever you might be, and I'll see you in the next one, number 29. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.